Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. It's a little bit after 6. We are being recorded, just so you know, live on YouTube for this event. 7 years ago, JEO approached the commission about doing their hazard mitigation plan, and now we're going for round 2, so this will be a review and an update. And this is the round 1 series of meetings. There's 2 large meetings, correct? And then if you need them to come to school or whatever individually, you can do that. The reports or documents that you have, if you don't get them filled out tonight, that's totally fine. You can fill those out, get them to me, or if you want to scan them yourself and send them to Becky, that's fine too. I can send them to Becky. This is Becky, and this is Kayla, and they're both from JEO, and so I'll let them know. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Troy. And thank you everyone for attending on kind of a chilly October evening, but I promise we'll get straight into the point. I anticipate this meeting will last maybe a little bit more than an hour, get you out of here early, but if any of you do want to stick around afterwards, have questions, or want to fill out your documents here tonight, you're more than welcome to do that. But as Troy said, many people do prefer to take them back with you and reach out to additional folks within your communities or districts to answer some of these questions. So we're going to take you through this step by step. So if this is your first time doing a hazard mitigation plan or attending a meeting like this, I promise we try to make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. So as Chris said, this is the first meeting of 2. So this is where we talk about your hazards of concern, and I'll define what a hazard means here in just a moment, and what are our risks and vulnerabilities as a district or community are. And then at that second meeting, which we anticipate holding in January, February of 2022, we'll then talk about, okay, following up from tonight's meeting, what can we do to reduce our risk to those vulnerabilities? So those are your mitigation actions. So that's kind of how we're linking those 2 meetings together. And then at the end of this presentation, I'll talk about the final steps in this planning process. And please, if you do have any questions at any point during while I'm up here talking, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or say, hey, Becky, I don't understand. So I'm here to just assist throughout this process. Before we really dig in, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. First, those of you that are attending here in person, you should have a printed copy of your draft profile or some initial questions if you're new to this planning process. We do have documents. Those same documents are available on the Google Drive. So if you prefer to fill them out in your Word document, you can do that and email that to us. That's totally fine. Or you can do it in the paper format and email it to us or mail it in. For those that are joining virtually by YouTube, you can also download those documents from the Google Drive. They should be all separated out by community, I believe, or by district. If you're not sure what profile or information you need to be filling out, just give me a call or send me an email and I'd be happy to help. But I do want to emphasize, be sure to download that document to your local computer rather than making any changes in the Google Drive. Otherwise, it'll be hard for us to track what those changes are. So since this is a live stream via YouTube, if you do have any questions throughout this presentation, please be sure to document them and send them to me by email or to Kayla, and we'll be happy to follow up with you or give us a call, and we can talk through any of those questions or concerns. As already stated, this is being recorded, and so this recording will also be available to you here tonight or those that are joining online. If you want to share this information with anyone at a later time, you can share this link. It'll take you directly to the Warren County YouTube channel. And I also just want to say, we all live very busy lives. We're connected to our phone 24/7. If you do need to take a phone call for any reason, totally understand, feel free to leave. You won't, disrupt the meeting from my point of view. So that's not a problem. We'll do brief introductions. Then we'll talk about what is a hazard mitigation plan. Why are we here tonight? Then we'll talk about, what are the benefits of having a mitigation plan. So that brings in the grants overview. We'll talk very briefly about it here tonight, and then talk more in depth here at the next meeting. Then I'll take you through step-by-step the worksheets and the type of information that we're trying to collect for you, so that we have the most recent updated information to include in your hazard mitigation plan. And then we'll wrap up with the project schedule and next steps and any questions that you may have at that point. Okay, I believe Kayla caught all of you coming in to sign in. As you know, Fema loves their documentation, so if you haven't signed in, please be sure to do that before you leave here tonight. This also ensures that we're able to reach back out to you if you do have any questions. But this is a public process, and as part of this planning process, FEMA does like to see who attended. So that's all the reasoning behind that sign-in sheet. If you're joining by YouTube, that does also satisfy the requirement of watching this presentation and providing the information to us when you complete the worksheet. So just send Kayla or myself an email that you attended online, and we'll be happy to get that documented as well. That email, you can send it to kvondracek, that's KV as in Victor, ONDRACEK@JDO.com. And if there are others in the room that are joining with you, please be sure to include all attendees. And then again, my name is Becky Appleford. I'm the project manager for this plan update. If you are returning to this planning process, it's really good to see some familiar faces from 5 years ago. I was happy to be involved with that planning process 5 or 7 years ago. And then Kayla will be the lead planner on this, and so she'll be really your main point of contact. I'm there as well, but she's really ensuring that we keep track of all the data and the information going into the plan. And Mary Baker is providing us quality control, as well as she at JEL, she works with all the different departments. We're a full engineering firm at JEL, and so ensuring that we're building resiliency into everything that we do at JEL. So by having a plan, that's starting that process. Okay, and before I kind of read through the slide here, can I have a short hands? Who has been a part of a hazard mitigation plan before? Awesome. I'd say about 50% of you. Hopefully you can share with your neighbor or your friend that, hey, this isn't so bad, I'm coming back. But as I say, to those of you that are new, Troy and the Emergency Management Commission hired JEO to really be facilitators of this process. This is your plan. We're here to glean the information, meet all of FEMA requirements so that you have a livable, workable document that you can implement when you're all said and done. So that's really what we're here to do. So you are not bothering us when you call us. You are not bothering us when you emailing us with any questions, okay? This is what we love to do. I know it's hard to believe that someone could enjoy writing a 500-page document, but we do. And really, like meetings like tonight, it's where we gain our passion. So, especially post-COVID, it's good to be from behind a computer. So, anyway, do not hesitate to reach out. Okay, so those that are new to hazard mitigation, I'm going to define, or FEMA defines, what that is here to start. So, as defined, it's the efforts to reduce loss of life and property by lessening the impact of disasters through taking action now before the next disaster. That's to reduce human and financial consequences later by analyzing risk, reducing risk, and insuring against risk. So I know that there's a lot of words in this definition, but some of the key phrases that really jump out at me is taking action now before the next disaster. We live in Iowa, in the great Midwest. We live and breathe, unfortunately, severe weather. We know flooding, we know tornadoes, we know derechos. This terminology that, unfortunately we're being impacted almost yearly at some point in our state, right? And here in Warren County. And so by having a hazard mitigation plan, you're doing it outside of a disaster so that you're thinking through when you're not in a stressful situation. Okay, who in my community is at risk? Who lives in a floodplain? Who maybe doesn't have adequate shelter? Maybe they live in a mobile home, so high winds and tornadoes put them at risk. Maybe we have nursing homes that during an evacuation situation, we need to ensure that we have adequate means to transport them. So these are all some of those key things that as a community or as a school district or a water district, we can be ensured to think about before that next disaster, and then identifying, okay, now I know what my risks are, what can we do as a community? And I know many of you are like one representative for one entire community, and that's kind of a big burden to hold. I encourage you, and I'll say this multiple times tonight, reach out to other people in your community, your elected officials, the guy that has 50 keys on his keychain who's been there 20 years. They know their community, you know your community, work together. It doesn't have to be all on one person. So, and it makes for a better plan, right? You're all coming together behind a common goal. So that's really the essence of hazard mitigation planning. You can see here on the left, if you're familiar with the emergency management cycle, it's one key aspect of that cycle, right? So we're constantly preparing, right? We know it's just a matter of time before we have winter storms hitting our area. So our salt trucks ready and our plows, all have the maintenance all ready to go so we can hit those roads when the snow starts to fly. And then the disaster hits, right? And we immediately go into response mode. And that response mode can be really short, a few hours, or it could be days or months, or COVID, it could be years, unfortunately. So, and then recovery, again, typically that recovery, depending on the scale of that disaster, can be quite long. In Nebraska, we're still recovering from the floods of March 2019 in portions of our communities. And so that recovery mode, unfortunately, can be quite long, but the idea of mitigation is to either eliminate or greatly shorten that recovery time because you've already put in those projects or those actions to eliminate that risk. So we know on the north side of town, for example, the intersection of Main and 2nd Street always floods. Anytime we get 2 inches of rain, it's flooding. That's a problem, right? We know that's a risk. So what can we do? Well, my city superintendent maintenance guy, he knows that culvert needs to be upsized. That is mitigation. You're upsizing that culvert to allow those water flows to get through there more quickly and efficiently. You can manage those 2-inch rainfalls much better. And so that's what mitigation is. That's how we can reduce or eliminate our risk to disasters or hazards. Okay, so I've touched on this a little bit already, but why develop a plan? And there are multiple reasons for doing so. First of all, it builds resiliency within our communities, our schools, all vulnerable populations, right? I know resiliency is really a big buzzword right now, but it really does. Second, FEMA does dictate that those that want to be eligible for certain FEMA grant funds, which I'll talk about here in just a moment, to have a current and updated hazard mitigation plan. And so you have to update that plan every 5 years in order to be eligible. And that's just saying to FEMA, hey, as our communities are growing and changing, our plan is growing and changing with it. I should say growing. It's changing and evolving with our communities. And so that's really important because our risks and vulnerabilities will be changing as well. And frankly, mitigation does work. Study after study, year after year, this does not change. For every dollar that's spent on mitigation planning and implementing those projects in our communities, it's saving at least $6 on your disaster cost and response time. So how incredible would that be if you put $1 in your bank and you got $6 back every time? That's huge. And that magnify that times, $100,000, $1 million project, and I know that's a lot, but that's why FEMA comes in and says, we'll help pay for those projects because we know the return on investment is good for our communities, good for our state, and saves our taxpayers lots of money because we're not responding to disasters year after year. Okay, so what do I mean by participating jurisdictions? I've talked about communities and cities, talked about school districts. So 5 years ago, all of the participating jurisdictions were cities and school districts. There were a couple cities and a couple of school districts that opted to not participate, and that's totally a choice, not required. FEMA does not require you to do this. But the carrot at the end of the stick is, if you want to be eligible for those pre-disaster funds, you do need to have a mitigation plan. And so it's almost like an insurance policy that while you may not be experiencing a disaster right now, we know unfortunately it's just a matter of time. And so by having this as a backup option, it's just a good thing. It's a good thing for our communities. Really, any taxing authority, FEMA defines a jurisdiction by any taxing authority. So you have the governing ability to levy taxes. And so for the county here, we're talking about city school districts. Obviously, Simpson College is participating, and they participated last time too, which is fantastic. Any water districts that have authority to manage their infrastructure. Fire districts, if you're not a sub-entity, so I know like Indianola Fire is here tonight, you're participating with Indianola City, but if you operate separately, then you'd be considered a separate participating jurisdiction. What I mean by that is, from FEMA's standpoint, if you have your own governing authority, you should have your own governing authority to go after your own grant funds. So they want you to be owning that piece of the pie, rather than leaning on the county or some other community to do that for you. They want you to kind of stand on your 2 legs and go after that funding yourself. So that's kind of changed, I will say, since the last plan update. It was okay if you did partner with a county or community, but now they really want that to be more ownership within our local jurisdictions. Questions on that? Questions on anything I've said so far? Okay, so what I have up here, just a basic county map. Got Warren County up here in white with all the communities. I know it's really hard to see, but get the idea. So really, anyone that falls within the boundaries of Warren County that are considered a taxing authority can participate in this plan, and I highly encourage you to do so. If you know of someone here, or community or school, or any other special district that you feel like should be attending, let them know. And that there's no cost to you other than your time. What is required to participate? Participate in the planning process. Attend a meeting. So by being here tonight, you're saying, yep, I want to participate. We're really ready to provide that information to you. Step 2, assist in data collection. And that simply means we've provided some worksheets for you to complete. We may follow up if you mention a planning document or maybe an ordinance that you might have. You might want a copy of that, but really the majority of the information that we need will come in the form of the worksheets that we give you. identify one mitigation action. So I know that might seem kind of nebulous right now, what that means. And I want this to be really clear. When you participate in the plan, I oftentimes get a question from people saying, yeah, but will FEMA dictate that I complete that action? Do I have to get that action done in the next 5 years? No. Would it be great that you did? Sure, because it means you're building in resiliency and reducing risk in your community. But FEMA knows, we realize that resources are finite, right? Funding may be extremely limited. You may have finite people to go after the grant application or to implement that project. And when I say one mitigation action, it could be as simple as we need a backup generator for our city hall. That's it. So that when a disaster hits and we lose power, our lights stay on, we can utilize that as a local emergency operations center and use that as our center of operations during response. So we're here to help you. If you don't know what to identify for your actions, we'll talk about that at round 2, and we'll help you through that process. Step 4, review all plan drafts. So you have in front of you actually a very early initial draft, and these are for you to mark up, make those changes. These are your community documents. We want to make sure that we are updating the information to your schools or communities as they are now. So if you see any mistakes, we want them marked up and provided to us. And as I'll explain here in a little bit, a lot of this information is from 5 years ago, so 2017 timeframe. So there will be outdated information in there. We try to update where we could or where we knew where to gather that public information, but definitely add anything that you think is pertinent. And then we'll have another new draft at round 2, all with the information that we talked about here tonight and early 2022 for you to review. And then you have one more time to review the entire document. You can focus on your profile, or you'll have the opportunity to look at the whole document if you prefer. So that will be during that public review process. And then lastly, this is important as well, adopt the plan by resolution. So FEMA does require that all governing entities go back to their councils or their boards and say, hey, we've participated in this plan. Now I'm asking you to adopt this this document. And again, it's not saying, yes, we will implement these projects. It's just saying we are aware of what's in the document. We'll do our best to maintain it in between the 5-year update, and we're aware of the benefits it provides to our community. And then just signifies, I guess, that final check mark to FEMA saying, yep, we know we went through this process, we agree with the risks and mitigation actions that are documented in the plan, and FEMA just files it. And so when you do want to go after grant funding, they'll just double check that you have that adoption resolution on file. And again, we'll help with that process. We have a template resolution that we'll provide to you at the end of the process for you to utilize or change as you need to for your needs. And I will also ask during public review process, we'll probably start that adoption resolution series at that point. So if you want to adopt the plan during the public review, you can do that. We'll talk about that more at the next meeting, but just want to give you a heads up on that. Okay, so one of the key benefits outside of building stronger communities is being eligible for FEMA grant funds. Has anyone heard of hazard mitigation grant program or building resiliency and infrastructure, building resilient and infrastructure communities? I can never get that acronym right, BRIC. This is a new, building resilient infrastructure in communities. FEMA loves their alphabet soup. Anyone heard of those 2 grant programs? No. Okay. So as I say, I will give a very brief overview of these grant programs, and we'll talk about it more next time. Really, it's to ensure that you know when you do go back to your governing boards, you can say, hey, we're now eligible for 75% of our costs being paid for through these grants. It is a competitive process, but you're only competitive if you have an adopted plan. So let's start on the left-hand side with Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, also called the HMGP. This is different from the other two on your right, and I'll explain here, insofar as this one is the only one that's triggered by a presidential disaster declaration. So when the derecho came through Iowa, for example, they tallied all the disaster costs that were accrued from that one disaster that impacted a significant part of the state. And they take a certain percentage of those accrued disaster impacts and set it aside into this program. And that program is available to anyone within the state of Iowa. So, even if Warren County isn't directly impacted by a derecho or a tornado, but it happens anywhere within your state and it hits a certain threshold, the state will be allocated a percentage of those funds. Excuse me. So, anyone within your state, you're just competing with your neighbors, okay? So, for another example, COVID-19 pandemic funds. They have decided to allocate to all of the states a certain amount of money to fund into this program, and I believe for Iowa it's $19 million estimated, and that this program is open now. The state is actually taking notice of interest forms right now through March, I believe March or April, excuse me, to apply for funding. So $19 million across the state of Iowa is actually a pretty good amount. Usually it's just a handful of $1 million that's available for everyone to apply for. So I highly encourage you, if you know the project that you want to go after funding for, reach out to the state, and I'll have that contact information here on the next slide to let them know that you're interested and see what those next steps are to apply. This is state administered, and all three programs are a 75-25% cost share. So what that means is FEMA will pay for 75% of the total cost of the project. The 25% is a local cost share. What's great about the state of Iowa, the state will pay 10% of that 25%. So really, the local share is only 15%. And I know it can still add up quite quickly, but when you're talking, oh geez, yes, I'm so sorry, I just got a tickle in my throat. 50% really does, thank you so much, helps a great deal. So keep that in mind. I know we work in a lot of other states, and the state doesn't contribute at all to that local cost share. So I'm just thrilled that the state of Iowa does that. As I already said, it's for use across the state. Typically, you can put in a notice of interest at any point. So the second you know you need funding, you can do that, and they'll keep your application on file or your notice of interest on file. And then once this program becomes available, you'll be at the top of the list, hopefully, depending on how they're prioritizing. So again, highly recommend, and that's why I like to talk about this at the first meeting too, is if there are funds available, sometimes you have to get your application in pretty quick. So there is some time on this program right now. Whereas the two on the right-hand side, it's an annual application process, whereas this is at any point, this is annually. So the middle one is BRIC. This is a brand new program. It's in its second year. They're just about to obligate funds from its first application period that's opened last year. So in 2020, this program had $500 million available for sharing across all 50 states and territories. This year, it's $1 billion. That is significant because the previous grant program called Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant, or PDM, that one was congressionally approved dollars, and they would maybe fund it at $200 million or so. But what this program does is it allocates 6% of federal funds post-disaster at any point in the country. So all of your hurricanes, all of your wildfires, all of your tornadoes, all your floods, every major disaster across the United States, 6% of those funds post-disaster get funneled into this program. And then FEMA opens it up, usually August or September, and gives out this notice of funding opportunity, kind of explaining what types of projects that they're looking for and they're going to prioritize. And they have the application period open through December or January of the same year, or January of the following year. So it's usually that fall time frame. And then from the moment you submit your application, it will take up to a year before funds are obligated if you're prioritized. So while the program itself isn't perfect, right, because it takes a long time for those, they have to review all the grant applications and funnel that money down towards the state, and then the state has to funnel it down to the communities. It takes a long time. So if you are looking to break ground next month, this is not the program for you. And in fact, even for HMGP, you have to, you can't have broken ground at all to be eligible. It's a reimbursable process. So the second you break ground on a project, unfortunately, the opportunity is ended. So it's really important why this funding process to be thinking ahead of, okay, what are we thinking of doing in 2 to 3 or 4 years, so that we can get our grant application ready and submitted, and then get the money funded in time for us to break ground. So it's not perfect, but it's something. And then lastly, flood mitigation assistance, also annual appropriation. So this one is still congressionally approved dollars, so they decide annually how much money to put in this program. And this one's exactly as it says. It's for projects that are flooding related. So if you have properties in your community that are repeatedly flooding, either they're considered repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss properties, and those property owners are eager to wash their hands of it, this is a great program for that. This program will help pay to buy that property and put that property back, give it back to the public, in essence. So that's,
I'm sorry, go back to the public, you said?
give it, well, to the public, but to the floodplain. For the flood to do what it needs and move where it needs to go. So it is it can be a property acquisition, or even if the homeowner wants to stay there, but they want to elevate their home, this program will do that too. So there are ways to do it on a property by property basis to elevate homes. And when folks are being repeatedly flooded, sometimes that's just the best option. So that's what that program is. And I will also say, if you are the property owners, a severe repetitive loss, sometimes they'll pay for 100% of the cost of the buyout, the demolition, and all that. So if any of that is of interest to your communities, let me know. We have specials that do deal with that kind of work. Okay.
I'm sorry,
Sure.
36-month period of warrant, what's that referred to?
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. So for the time that you get obligated funds, you have 36 months to complete the project. And then if you do need an extension, you can do that. Usually they allow a 1-year extension. Yep. Yeah. Contact. So for all of these contacts, Dusty, the Deputy State Hazard Mitigation Officer, or SHMO, is your primary point of contact. I also provided their general email. It'll go to any of their lead mitigation folks there at the state. They'll be able to follow your questions to the right person. This link here at the bottom, or if you just go to the Homeland Security of Iowa website, it's pretty easy to navigate around. They have a ton of information on there about the grant programs, how you're eligible, what you need to provide them, the types of projects they're prioritizing right now. So that's a good first place to start, and then definitely reach out to Dusty and go from there to see what your next steps are. Questions on those grant programs? Okay. Okay, so kind of talking in very vague terms of, okay, mitigation project, but what does that mean? So that I did a lookup. FEMA documents all the projects that are funded through these grant programs, and I did a quick search to see what has been funded here in the state of Iowa, really going all the way back to the early 1990s, but really this picked up steam post the Stanford Act, so when mitigation plans were required and so forth, so mid-2000s to current. And it runs, and again, I know these are really general, but the idea is your tornado sirens, your backup generators for critical facilities like your city hall, your police departments, fire departments. Talk about property acquisition and elevation. So if you need homes or critical facilities elevated, these grants will pay for it. Safe rooms, so your tornado safe rooms. If you're building a brand new school, it is super, you can get a lot of funds to pay for safe rooms to be part of your locker rooms. We have a school in Nebraska that funded a safe room, and it's a multi-purpose room that's lockers day in and day out, but when they need it for tornado shelter, it's now a tornado shelter. So funds are there for that. Utility protective measures for water, gas, utility lines, water and sanitary sewer system protective measures, stormwater management, so upsizing culverts, your diversions, your water retention or detention, local flood control, maybe you need a local berm or a levee. These are all different types of projects, and really this BRIC BRIC program, they're really trying to get more innovative with the types of projects that to reduce risk and increase resilience in communities. If you have an idea and you don't know if it's fundable or not, it's worth asking. We're definitely seeing FEMA being more open about different types of projects. So really, if you can dream it, it might be possible to be funded. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears and talk about the document itself and the planning process. So the document itself, and if you're curious to see what's in there today in the 2017 plan, we have it available on the JDO website. You go to jdo.com to the hazard mitigation services. You can go, you'll find a link for Warren County, and I think I have a link on here at the end. And we have the current plan on there that we're updating here. But the entire document is around 500 pages, I believe. But the upfront, which is just an overview of the entire county, gives a description and a risk assessment of all the different hazards that the planning team has identified to include in the plan. So that it'll talk about the planning process and the number of meetings, where the meetings were held, the planning area profile, so your demographics, number of nursing homes and so forth. Then your risk assessment, talking about each of the hazards, which I'll explain here in just a minute. Discussion of capabilities, then a table of your mitigation actions and strategies, and then at the end, chapter 6 is a plan implementation and maintenance. So this is a living document. It is a good idea to pull this out once a year and ensure that the document is staying current with your community needs. And then the participant sections are on the back end of the plan, and we would stick those in what we call the Warren County appendix. So every jurisdiction that participates will have their own document, and that's what you have here in front of you. It will be, when it's all said and done, we have all the information in there, around a 20 to 30 page document. So you're not having to pull out an entire 500 pages, you just have to focus on 30. And that 30 pages will be very specific to your community, and it will have your mitigation actions and your risks and a list of your critical facilities. All your pertinent information will be right there. Okay, so what hazards are going to be profiled in this updated plan? Action actually, they're pretty close to the original list from 2017. However, at the kickoff meeting that we had with the planning team, these are the hazards that we decided to profile for the plan. Excuse me. So I'm just going to read through them, and I'll note the ones that are a slight change from 5 years ago. We have animal and plant disease, so your agricultural, but also if you had emerald ash borer concerns, that would go there. Dam failure, drought, earthquake, expansive soils, extreme temperatures. That is our first change. Before it was extreme heat, now we're making it all encompassing extreme heat and cold. Flooding, grass and wildfire, hazardous materials release. This was broken out separately into like transportation, chemical release, and fixed site chemical release. Now it's just all hazardous materials, no matter how it's released or where it's released, it's going to be profiled in that. Infrastructure failure, levee failure, pandemic disease, severe thunderstorms. This does include hail and lightning. Hail was oftentimes profiled separately, but since it's a result of a severe thunderstorm, we're including it in there. Severe winter storms, that is everything from your ice storms to your blizzards to everything in between. Sinkholes, terrorism, again, terrorism, we mean all types of terrorism. Oftentimes with schools, they are concerned with terrorism. We consider that also to be civil disorder, active shooter situation, but also cybersecurity type terrorism is obviously becoming more of a threat in many areas of the country. Then wrapping up with tornadoes and windstorms and transportation incidents. I will say you guys, with your pandemic disease, I think it was called human disease 5 years ago, you guys are ahead of the game in ensuring that you have that documented plan pre-COVID. I know there are a lot of plans in areas that did not have that in their plan, they're having to add it now. So definitely ahead of the curve there. So this is an all hazards plan. We're talking your natural hazards from your severe weather to your man-made hazards like hazardous materials. Any questions on this list? I know that's a lot of hazards, and one of the critical things that you're going to be doing with your worksheets is, out of all of these, which are the ones that keep us up at night? Because they're a concern in our community, because we haven't found that solution to reduce risk, because it just continues to flood in one part of town, or if we went through a 5 or 10 year drought, what would we do? Do we have a contingency plan for water? Some of these hazards, thankfully, do not happen often or ever, or haven't happened. But if they were, like, oh goodness, how would we respond? Are we prepared? Those are the things I want you to be thinking about. Not to cause fear or concern, but to give you the power to do something about it now. And that's what this plan is about. Okay. Worksheets, we give you about a month to get these done to keep us on track. Okay? So we do ask if you can return them by November 29th. That would be ideal. And if you're like me, you'll leave here tonight and be like, oh, I'll get to that this weekend, and set it aside. And then, then it's Halloween, and then it's Thanksgiving, and I've forgotten, what did Becky say about this stuff? What do I need to do? So if you can, I highly encourage, if you can get it done sooner than November 29th, awesome, you're more likely to remember what we talked about here today. But if not, that's okay. And if for some reason, a kid gets sick, work gets really busy, or you need to reach out to someone to help you out with the worksheets, and you need longer than that, that's fine, just let us know. But Kayla will be giving you a call on December 1st or so and be like, where are your worksheets? So this just ensures that we stay on track, because the mitigation plan, like I said, there is a 5-year cycle. And to ensure that we don't have any gap in expiration, we want to get that plan done before the next expiration. And so I'll show that here with the schedule here and just a few slides. Okay, so we're going to dig into these worksheets, talk about what's in there and the type of information we're looking to gather. You probably have already flipped through there quite a bit. Notice that there's just some brief information on your location, your geography, relation to any streams or water bodies, demographics. So we have been on pins and needles waiting for the demographic census information for 2020 to come through. So unfortunately, we are waiting to put that in because we want the latest and greatest data in there, excuse me. So we thought we'd have it by now, but by round 2, we expect to have it. So I just want that to be noted that that data is still not there. Then you have your capability assessment, which is a pretty standard table, plan integration, future development trends, community lifelines, hazard prioritization, mitigation strategy. So all throughout that document, you're going to see red text. Some of it will be explaining what it is, and then we'll have questions, trying to glean the information that we need from it. If you're new to this process, you may have a lot more red questions than others. And that's just because you're new to this planning process. And so you'll see at round 2 a much more complete profile. But all of those questions will be red for you to complete. Okay, so you go about halfway through your profile. You'll see a header that says critical facilities and community lifelines. It'll say community lifelines, excuse me, and then if I say transportation, and then a couple more headers will say critical facilities. If you participated in the plan 5 years ago, which most of you here tonight did, you will have a table that's partially filled out already. And what that is a list of the critical facilities that you provided 5 years ago. And we just want to confirm whether those are still current or if they need to be updated. And then also if any of those facilities have backup generators. So when you're looking at that list, we're just asking to let us know. I apologize. If that facility has never moved in all its time in history, you can just put same location. But if it has moved, you've created a new 911 dispatch center, we want added to that, okay? Or oftentimes we'll have you fire halls built in between 5-year updates. So you'll want to add that as a new facility in the table that's directly below it. And so just add the general name of the facility, and then the address that it's located at. And if you're aware, if it has a backup generator or not, please let us know. That's just one more means of helping you and helping us to identify those community needs. If, again, this is for you to mark up. So in this example, Simpson Water Tower and radio communication, let's say in the last couple of years, a new generator has been bought and installed there. Cross that off, it's now a yes, and you can put that there. And then put in the clarifying remarks as well as you secure water treatment plant number 1. And then down below, they built a water treatment plant number 2 and have provided that information. So again, and we did try to provide some examples of the types of critical facilities, and actually that's what I'm going to talk about here too. What do we mean by community lifeline? And I know that's kind of hard to read, but it's really any service that your community or special district needs to ensure continuity of service or a response need during a disaster. So they define it as a lifeline enables the continuous operation of critical business and government functions and is essential to human health and safety or economic security. And so to align more with what FEMA is doing at the federal level, and also to align with a lot of the ESF functions that Troy does for his emergency operations plan, is these different community lifelines. And so those are the types of critical facilities that we want to see in your plan. Now, if you have like multiple substations, power generating substations, you don't necessarily have to put them all down and document them. We have a kind of a catch-all phrase for that kind of thing. Under energy and power and fuel, let's say, multiple power substations are located throughout the community or throughout the county. So if that's a concern, we do catch that. But the other community lifelines include safety and security, food, water, and shelter, health and medical, energy, communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. And you'll see right before your critical facility tables, we do have an area for hazardous materials. We look at the tier 2 data that the state has to gather that hazardous material facility information. But even though it's state data, it's not always accurate. So if you see issues or we're missing something, again, feel free to make that change. Okay, so the next step after your community lifelines will be a section on your hazard prioritization. Let me take a step back. If you are new to this planning process, you won't obviously have a pre-filled table. You'll just have an upweight table, and you can just provide us a list of those critical facilities and a general location. If you don't have the exact address, just say intersection of Main and First. And that will be more than adequate. And then at the next meeting, we'll have a map input into the document for you to review to ensure that we captured all of that correctly. So now when we move on to hazard prioritization, so that's where we're taking that, I think it's 16 or 18 hazards, and narrowing it down to those ones that keep you up at night. So prioritizing those hazards that we want to put at the top of the list to fix first, and identify those mitigation actions and problem solve those issues. So if you're a returning member to this plan, you will see in your document some paragraphs of the hazards that you or someone else that represented your community provided information on. And so flooding, tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, whatever the hazards were. Generally, we suggest 3 to 7 hazards. We want it to be a plan that is appropriate in size and goal for a 5-year plan. You can't fix all 18 hazards in 5 years. I wish you could, but unfortunately, you have to prioritize which hazards we're going to try and fix first in our community. So when you review those write-ups, definitely read the write-up. It's from 5 years ago, so some of it's going to be outdated. But then we ask you some prompting questions to help fill in the gaps that it's that. So first, you'll have a question asking, is this still a hazard of priority or a top concern? And you'll circle yes or no. And if it's a no, then you can skip all those other questions and move on to the next one. But if it's a yes, then you do want to answer the rest of the questions that we have. And many of them will be essentially asking, so why is this a hazard of top concern still for your community? I really encourage you to think critically and provide as much specific information as you can to get to the essence and the problem that you have within your community. What is at risk? Why are we concerned with flooding? And again, that's an easy one for me to pick up, but if there's a specific area of your community that does continuously flood for whatever reason, tell me about that. Tell me what you've observed. Or maybe if you don't know, reach out to the person that you do know as to, gosh, can I do something? I keep having to put a barricade to tell folks to stop, driving through this because it floods, when we get an inch of rain. So tell me a story about why is that a problem, okay? This will be really critical and helpful when we get to the next meeting too. Okay, now what can we do about this problem? So once you've reviewed what you provided 5 years ago, we give you a chance then to reflect on of all of those other hazards that you didn't have from 5 years ago, do we need to add any new ones? COVID, we just got out of COVID, hopefully, or dealing with COVID still. That greatly impacted community did you have a significant economic impact? Maybe that is a hazard of concern. Or, we just put in a berm to deal with flooding in our community, just for example. Okay, levee failure, if that was to fail during a flood, it would be a crick. So it's how has our community evolved and what concerns are keeping us up now 5 years later. So we give you a chance to add those to your list. And so that's what this looks like here, pretty much towards the end of your document, second to last page, I believe it is. And feel free to add any additional ones that you want to identify any solutions for. Again, we provide space for you to describe to us, tell us your story, your problem story of why is this a hazard for your community, why is this an issue? Describe any past events. Or if it's never impacted your community before, but if it did, well, this is what would have happened. If we had an earthquake, that building, I know it was not made to current standards, it will fall and it will hurt a lot of people. That's the kind of information I want to know. So be thinking about risk to people, property, economy, and your capabilities. Do we have enough people or the resources to take care of this problem? Again, think about your problem statements. And then provide any actions done to reduce the impacts from each hazard. So maybe you are taking steps towards reducing your risk already today. Tell us about that. Fema loves to see that you're set aside funds on your own means, in your own terms, to take action. It's not a requirement, and if you haven't done anything, that's fine. That's why you have this plan. But if you have done anything, we want to know and give you credit for that. Okay, I'm just going to spend 1 minute on this slide. Really don't want to say it's a theory of what we're trying to get at, but it's really, what is that intersection of the hazard versus our vulnerabilities, okay? So why is it a vulnerability? So as I've said already, so we have those 18 hazards, and yes, all of them, we, as a planning team, back in August, we decided all of those could impact our county. But our, for example, my community, we don't have any dams nearby. That one, that's not a hazard for me to be concerned with. I can immediately mark that off my list. But I know that if a tornado came through and it took a direct hit to my mobile home park on the north side, that would be horrible for my community. Because a lot of these people, they work in the industries, it would impact the economy, it would just be devastating. So I have a vulnerable system, I have a key set of people that live in infrastructure that's not very secure, high winds. And also these are people that work within my community, and if they were focused on recovering from a disaster, the economy would be greatly impacted. We have our tornado over here. All right, that's our risk of disaster. That's where it's intersecting. So now, what are we going to do about that? That's where this problem statement and mitigation occurs in that nice shade of red right there. Okay, so today is identifying our hazards and our vulnerable systems. Next time we're going to talk about what can we do about this area right here to get us out of harm's way. So vulnerable systems can be, again, key vulnerable people, are young or old, tend to be most at risk. Economy, so if we have key industries that if they were directly impacted, would be really devastating for our communities. Land use development, do we have good key ordinances and codes to ensure that we're not building in the wrong place or the wrong way? Infrastructure and critical facilities, are those in good working order? Cultural assets, natural resources. Those are all good things to be thinking about. And then your ability, resources, and or willingness to mitigate, prepare, respond, and recover. So do we have a means, do we have evacuation routes? I mean, sometimes that's what Troy probably thinks about, but are we thinking about how we can gain access if key roads are flooding to our nursing homes and we keep them out? Do we have a high profile of people to get them out of harm's way? These are some of those things to be thinking about. Okay, before I move on to plan integration, that's pretty much your, what we call community profile or district profile. Any questions on that? We are getting close to being done. So we hit the 1 hour mark. Plan integration. So this is a separate document, excuse me. It's also on the Google Drive. And all communities and special districts will have one. Essentially, we're asking, what planning documents do you have in place already? Outside of your hazard mitigation plan, what do you have in place? And again, I know this is hard to read, but we give you some prompt questions here, or a table to start with, to give you an idea of the types that most communities have. If you're a school district, we have a separate profile that we provided you that asks more specific questions to your school district, but the essence is the same. So what emergency response plans do we have in place? What comprehensive or strategic planning documents do we have? Do we have a capital budget or capital improvement plan? Any building codes in place? Ordinances, like a drought ordinance, water emergency response plans, and contingency plans. We want to know about those. And FEMA actually requires us to do a review of those to see how do we overlap with hazard mitigation. Maybe you've already identified in your comprehensive plan that, hey, we want to be building away from our floodplain to ensure that we're not putting people in harm's way or industries in harm's way. So we want to ensure that what you're putting in your other planning documents align with your hazard mitigation plan. Because if we're saying one thing in one document and something else in another, that doesn't work. And so we want to make sure that we're doing a full review, capturing all that information. And maybe you are basically already identified some mitigation actions like upsizing culverts in your capital improvements plan. That should be in your mitigation plan. So again, you first start with this table, just saying yes or no, we have this. And if you don't have any, we have many communities that don't have any planning mechanisms. That is okay. We just have to say, you know what, you don't have any. This is your plan. But we just need to kind of go through that thought process. Then, for the one that you do have, where you say yes, we then have matching pages that go with that particular document. So if you have a master plan or a comprehensive plan, we'll have a sheet that's specific to that. And as I said, fire, school, and other districts, we have a very similar worksheet, just slightly different approach or different types of documents that you'll probably have. Again, both documents are due Monday, November 29th. If you need more time, just let us know. You can do them either in the paper form or feel free to download them from the Google Drive. And then feel free to email them to Kayla, give them to Troy. You can mail it to us here at our JE office in Lincoln. However, if you do mail it, make a copy. Take a picture with your phone. Unfortunately, we have had a couple get lost in the mail or get delivered to the wrong place, and it's just heartbreaking when we have to say, I'm sorry, I don't have it. So if that does happen, or if you do decide to mail it, just make a copy. And we are good about following up and be like, hey, this came in the mail today, it's received. Next steps. Invite others to participate. As I said, this should not be all in one person. And thankfully, I know there are several people from like Warren County, several people from Indianola. If you have multiple people within your school district or your community, get together or exchange emails. Be like, hey, I'm taking care of this section, or I'm the fire department. I'll be sure to talk about, fire response if you guys can take care of everything else. Be sure to coordinate how you're going to write that document and share notes with each other. Definitely encourage you to return one, but if that doesn't work for you, that's fine. Send us what you have, and we'll compile it. But the key thing is, don't take it all on yourself. Get a mitigation buddy, that's what I like to say. If you have key stakeholder groups, vulnerable populations, really active groups. Involve them, let them know you came tonight, ask them to come to the meeting next time. We do have project flyers printed if you want to take some back with you here tonight. That's also available on our website and on the Google Drive if you want to download it, post it on your Facebook page, your community website, whatever the case may be, in your library. Please get the word out. Because when it comes to, especially for public review time, we want as many people to be reviewing this as possible. But even better, if they can attend a meeting and provide input, that would be best. The other thing about inviting others to participate, let your governing boards know you came here tonight. Show them the flyer. Just be like, hey, heads up, in about 6 months, we're gonna be adopting this plan and you guys will have to sign that adoption resolution. Otherwise, all this will be for nothing. So if they have questions now is the time for them to get involved and put their input into the plan. And then attend the next meeting. I'll have a schedule here on the next slide. And then we do have a project website, jdo.com/Warren County, all one word, -HMP. Okay, so here's our schedule. Hard to believe we're in October already. Round 1 meeting here. We're looking at having our round 2, our second and final meeting here in January, probably towards the end of January. But we will definitely email and mail you when that meeting has been scheduled. It'll be a very similar form. We'll meet here, and all that will be the same. So if you know of others that should be attending, feel free to let them know. Mark out their January and come to a meeting. Then we're aiming for public review to be in that March or April timeframe. And we set aside 30 days to be like, okay, go to your boards, sit down with your document, make sure everything is lining up the way you want it. And this is the last chance to review before it goes to the state and to Fema for their review. So it does go through a state review and a Fema review to ensure that we're meeting all of their regulations and requirements. And then once you've reviewed it, we'll incorporate those changes. You can also start adopting the plan at that point. We'd love to get the adoption started early. And then we'll submit the plan in early summer, late spring, so about May. Between the two agencies, it can take anywhere from 60 to 90 days, especially if there's a lot of disasters going on. It can take up to 90 days. So that's why we want to ensure that we get it to them at the beginning of the summer so that we're approved by the end of summer, because the plan does expire in September. So we have more than enough time, and I know it feels like forever from now, September 2022, but it goes fast. And if a disaster strikes, it goes really fast. So that's our general schedule. Here's our contact information. I have business cards if you like a business card. But we're here to help. If you have any questions, give us a call, send us an email. I'll take any questions now. Sorry. Yes, sir.
I'm looking at the document from 2017. When I clicked the link, did you say there's a list of appendices? I can show you it.
Do you mind if I come look? So go back one. So this is what we call the upfront. So it's kind of a general overview. If you go back one.
I think I got it.
Oh, sorry about that.
Here, I can find it.
There should be on our website. If there isn't, I'll make sure there is. There should be Warren County appendix, and then we have like other appendices that have like the sign-in sheets and other worksheets that we have. Actually, if you don't mind opening up a new web page and go to jdo.com.
Can everyone sign in?
Oh, I know. No, you're fine.
I
You're
just
fine.
couldn't see. I didn't see the appendices.
And then go to services, and then hazard mitigation planning. And then scroll down about half, you'll see my picture pop up, and then you go right past there. Yep. And then planning documents. And then Warren County. And then scroll down a little. Here we go.
Okay.
Yep. Here's the upfront, and then appendices, and then Warren County participant sections.
Okay.
And then that'll have all of the communities and school districts in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Thank you so much. If you want to stick around or if you have questions for me and Kayla, we're here to help. Otherwise, have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.